Hello, this is Susan Woodcock, and thank you for joining me for this presentation on the Buckram-Fold lined and interlined Roman shade. I'm the owner of Home Deck Gal and Custom Workroom Technical Center, also known as Workroom Tech, here in Tryon, North Carolina, and producer of Custom Workroom Conference. This is a follow-up to the Buckram-Fold Blackout Roman shade. In July, I introduced this new method, which uses buckram instead of ribs or rods to provide stability and structure to the shade folds. It has been tested by Workrooms and works for both blackout lined only or blackout lined and interlined shades. The printable PDF downloads with a supply list and step-by-step instructions can be found on my blog at homedeckgal.com. It was also published in the July issue of Drapery and Design Digital Digest. Today's presentation is for a Buckram-Fold lined and interlined Roman shade. Not all shades are blackout lined, and yes, it is possible to create a Buckram-Fold shade with sateen lining and interlining if using transparent buckram. It really works great. The sewing steps are a little different and I think easier than the method I shared for a Buckram-Fold blackout shade. It's easier because you don't have to do special things to hide the pinholes of light. The transparent buckram provides stability to the folds without looking stiff or bulky. In fact, when the light shines through a shade made with face fabric, lining, interlining, and translucent buckram, you can't see anything at all. No one will ever know that you've added that buckram to the shade. A printable PDF download with a supply list and the step-by-step instructions for this method can also be found on my blog at homedeckgal.com. Please note that the instructions are different than what I shared for the blackout Buckram-Fold shade. So you will want to be sure to download all the instructions. Here are the materials and supplies for this shade. You'll need face fabric, and I used a cotton stripe. Lining, and I used Hanes Classic Sateen. You'll need heavy flannel interlining, and I used the white. And that is what I would recommend because it does not yellow the face fabric. Unless you're using a dark face fabric, then you could use a natural interlining. I'm using the Dufix Fusible Transparent Buckram. The buckram I'm using for this shade is number 101981, but it also comes in other sizes. So you'll have to check the Dufix catalog, and Dufix sells only to the trade. So this is a product that is for professional workrooms. You'll need shade rings with cord shroud or ladder tape, or safety shade forever rings and ring locks, lift cord, a weight bar, basic sewing tools and rulers, and an iron, and a Roman shade lift system that accepts cords. The size of buckram used should be half of the ring spacing or slightly less. For example, 3-inch buckram is used for 6-inch vertical ring spacing, and 4-inch buckram is used for 8-inch ring spacing. If your ring spacing is 7 inches, you'll want to use 3-inch buckram. You'll need 1 piece of buckram for the hem and each section between the rings. The shade in this presentation is made with 3-inch buckram for 6-inch vertical ring spacing. And here are the cuts. You cut the face fabric, the finished width, plus 8 inches by the finished length, plus 8 inches. So the 8 inches for the width includes 2 doubled side hems that are 2-inch doubled side hems. So you need 4 inches on each side for the side hems. And the finished length is the cut length, is the finished length plus the doubled hem plus 2 inches for board mounting. So I'm using a 6-inch allowance for the doubled hem plus 2 inches to get 8 inches. You'll adjust that for the size doubled hem that you want to use. So if you're using a 4-inch doubled hem, plus 2 inches for board mounting, you need to allow 10 inches. You'll cut the lining and interlining, the finished width, by the finished length plus 2 inches. Cut pieces of fusible transparent buckram, finished width, minus a ½ inch. You'll need 1 piece for each section between the rings. Here's the fabrication step-by-step, and if you go ahead and download and print the instructions from my website, you can have those to follow along. You'll place the main fabric face down on the work table, fold over 4 inches on each side, measuring to check that the width is accurate. Fold the cut edge under to create 2-inch doubled side hems down each side and press. At the bottom, fold over 6 inches and fold the cut edge under and press to create a 3-inch doubled bottom hem. You do want to do it in this order, so you do the side hems first and then the bottom hem. Cover the back of the face fabric with interlining, trimmed to fit the width and length. Go ahead and press over the interlining so it is flat and smooth. Starting at the bottom, place 1 piece of translucent buckram, even with the crease that's pressed in the bottom finished length at the bottom of the interlining. Do not fold it into the hem. The double fold hem will be below the buckram. And it's a little difficult to see, but that piece of buckram, that first piece of buckram is in place, but because it's transparent, it's kind of hard to see on the picture. But it's placed right at the bottom of the interlining above that doubled fold hem. Measure from the top edge of the first piece of buckram 3 inches for using 3-inch buckram, and place the second piece evenly spaced. Stab pins into each end to hold the buckram pieces in place. You could also use weights. Repeat for the rest of the pieces of buckram, spacing 3 inches apart. So I have the first piece of buckram, and this is actually a 6-inch ruler, so it works great for spacing every 3 inches. If you're using 4-inch buckram, you would be spacing them 4 inches apart for 8-inch ring spacing. And I'm stabbing the pins along the edges, and you'll see why I'm doing that coming up to hold everything in place. You can't really put pins across the center because you're going to have to add the lining. So let's look at that next. Now we're covering the back of the shade with lining, but leave those pins along the outside edges to hold the buckram in place. You don't want it moving around. You want it to stay level and square. Working from the center, press and steam the lining to fuse the buckram between the lining and the interlining. You want to continue over the entire back. As you work towards the outside edges, then you can remove the pins, unfold the side hems, and tuck the edges of the buckram under the side hems, and include the lining under the side hems, and then continue pressing all the way to the outer edges. So you're working from the center, you're pressing and fusing the lining, the buckram, and the interlining together. That's why it's important to use the fusible transparent buckram. Other suppliers sell a transparent buckram, but they're not fusible. And we want the buckram to stay in place and not shift as the shade is being used. So that's why you're making sure it's nice and level and square. So do this carefully. After the lining's all pressed in place with the buckram, insert your weight bar into the bottom hem, and you can fold up the bottom hem, insert your weight bar, and then finish the bottom and side hems by hand stitching or using an adhesive tape or fabric glue. Finishing the hems with a blind hemming machine is not recommended for this style of Roman shade. Mark the ring spacing at the top edge of each piece of buckram. The ring spacing will be 2.5 inches inset from each side and 10 inches or less apart horizontally in the center. For this sample, 4 columns of rings were needed. The ring at the bottom hem is actually going to be sewn to include that bottom hem. So you can see that in the photo at the right. That first ring needs to catch that fabric through to the face fabric. You'll hand stitch rings at each mark using a thread that matches the face fabric. Sew through the lining, the translucent buckram, and the interlining, making a small stitch through to the face fabric. So you're sewing the rings on just like you would on a Roman shade that does not have the buckram included. This translucent buckram is very soft and it's very easy to stitch through, so it's not difficult as it sounds. It's very simple, very easy to do. It's almost like you don't have buckram in the shade. Once all your rings are sewn on, you can measure and mark the finished length, attach the shade to the headrail system or the board or both, thread the cord through the rings using a cord shroud, bladder tape, or safety shade ring locks, following the manufacturer's instructions. Attach required cord safety warning tags and product labels, which are outlined in the cord safety standards. I must say I'm pretty proud of the board mount there and how nice that looks in that bottom left picture. And you can see in the photo on the right at how neat and tidy those folds are with the buckram included. Just to point out that using buckram that is exactly half of the vertical ring spacing does create a slightly spaced cascading look to the Roman shade folds. I happen to really like that. I think it folds up flatter and neater than all the folds stacking on top of themselves. But sometimes you might want a tight stack, maybe to clear a window frame. So if you do want to have a tighter stack on your folds, use buckram that is smaller than the fold size. So if you're doing 8-inch vertical ring spacing, use a 3-inch buckram instead of 4. I hope you've enjoyed this presentation. I'm sure you have questions. I'm happy to answer questions for you. So just get in touch. The how-to instructions can be found at homedecl.com under the tab that says blog. In exchange for offering these free instructions, I would appreciate your support. Please subscribe to my YouTube channel and promote workroom education by sharing this new method and tagging me and my websites to your followers on social media, and I will do the same for you. Thanks so much. Have a great day. Bye.